다 이루었다고 오늘 우리에게 말씀해 주셨어요.
God has proclaimed His word that it is finished.
발견이 돼야 되겠죠.
May you uncover this.
발견이 되지 않고는 믿으려고 해도 잘 안 믿어져요.
And even if you try to have faith in that, if you do not uncover it first, you cannot have faith.
어떻게 하면 발견이 되겠어요?
How can you uncover this truth?
누리고 있으면 자꾸 발견되게 하십니다.
When you're continuously enjoying it, God will allow you to uncover it.
그래서 자꾸만 누림을 얘기하는 거예요.
And that's why we emphasize to enjoy.
그래야 눈이 열리고요. 눈이 열려야 믿음이 돼요.
That's when your spiritual eyes will be open, and that is when you'll possess faith.
눈이 열리면요. 아직 안 일어났는데도 믿음이 돼요.
And if your spiritual eyes are open, but yet even if it's not taking place, you'll be able to have faith in that.
눈이 열리면 아직 많이 남았는데도 그게 내게 언약이 돼.
And when your spiritual eyes are open, you'll come to see there are many things that must be your covenant and will be placed inside of you.
그리고 반드시 된다는 믿음이 탁 생겨요.
And rightfully so, you'll be able to have that full conviction that it will rightfully be done.
어떻게 보면 우습잖아요.
And of course, it seems quite foolish.
이걸 너무 강하게 얘기해 보면 믿음이 모자란 사람은 저 사람 미쳤나 이런 생각.
But for those who lack to have faith, if they listen to such word like this, they'll say that person has gone crazy.
아니면 너무 심하다 이래 얘기하지.
Or one may say that that's to an extreme case.
자기는 아니에요.
However, for that person alone, it's different.
눈이 열려 거기에 들어와서 언약이 딱 돼버려요.
When their spiritual eyes are open, and that becomes their covenant.
이걸 보고 미리 응답이라고.
We say that that person has received the answer in advance,
아직 안 왔어요.
even if it's not yet come to them.
그리고 진짜 믿음이 있고 딱 된다고 생각되지면 정복 딱 돼요.
And when they have faith and they truly hold on to it, they'll be able to have conquest.
우리의 정복은 영적인 정복이잖아요.
We must be able to have the spiritual conquest first.
그게 미리 정복이에요.
And that's what it means to conquer in advance.
그럼 한마디로 끝났어요.
In other words, everything has been finished.
남은 것은 하나님의 시간표.
And what is left for you to do is all in God's time schedule.
나는 누리면서 그 시간표를 기다려요.
You just simply enjoy as you wait for His time schedule to be upon you.
그게 신앙생활이에요.
And that is your walk of faith.
그래 이게 하나하나 자꾸만 되어져가는.
And little by little, it will take place.
오늘도 그 하나님의 그 언약의 여정 중에 하루인 줄 믿습니다.
I do believe that it is the day of today in which we are in the midst of God's covenantal journey.
로마입니다.
Today's message is entitled Rome.
사도행전 23장 1절에서 11절.
It is Acts 23, 1 through 11.
로마는 지금 미국이죠.
And so in the present time, Rome is America.
로마는 바울의 언약이었어요.
And Rome was the covenant God has given to Paul.
바울의 근본 언약은 그리스도였지.
The fundamental covenant Paul has received was Jesus Christ.
그런데 지가 그 그리스도를 해야 될 언약이 어디냐니까 로마였어요.
But yet, what was the fundamental covenant that must be acted upon? It was to testify in Rome.
본래 사명을 받을 때 이방인과 임금들과 유대인 이렇게 받았잖아요.
When he first received the covenant from the Lord, he said that he has been called as a chosen instrument to go and carry out the Lord's name to the Gentiles, to the kings, and the
왕도
children of Israel.
왕도 맞고 유대인도 맞지만 가장 근본 이방인.
Rightly so, he was given the commission to go testify the gospel to the kings and to the children of Israel. But most importantly, it was to the Gentiles.
이스라엘을 벗어나야지.
It's because he needed to go beyond the Israelites to go and testify to the Gentiles.
그게 세계 복음화예요.
And that headed towards world evangelization.
이건 하나님의 소원이거든요.
And this is God's desire.
절대 변하지 않기 때문에 절대 계획이에요.
It is the unchanging truth, and this is God's absolute plan.
이것을 하나님께서 사도 바울에게 딱 심어준 거죠.
And this was planted in the heart of Apostle Paul.
그러면 사도 바울은 절대 로마를 그냥 넘어가지 못하지.
And for Apostle Paul himself, he had to go to Rome.
항상 마음에 딱 걸려 있죠.
It was always placed inside of his heart to go to Rome.
우리도 마찬가지예요.
And it's the same for us even now.
미국이 딱 마음에 들어와 있다. 그러면 그 사람은 미국 응답을 받겠지.
If one is able to have the covenant to save America, then they will rightfully be used to save America.
사도 바울은 당대 최고의 그런 그림을 가진 사람이에요.
And for Apostle Paul, he had this tremendous great picture of God.
하나님이 보기에 사도 바울이 그 시대의 최고로 큰 사람이에요.
And before God, he was the most important person.
가장 마음에 합한 사람이지.
And he was the one that truly had God's heart as his own.
우리도 이 시대에 이런 사람이 돼야 합니다.
May you all be like this in this age.
미국 교회는 많이 영적으로 힘들어져 가고 있어요.
Right now, spiritually, many of the churches of America are crumbling down.
그러나 아직도 상당한 제자가 남아요.
But rightfully so, there are many of the hidden disciples within the churches of America.
없어지기 전에 찾아야 돼.
before they disappear. We must go and seek them out.
특별히 목사님 제자들을 많이 찾아요.
And we must be able to go and seek out the pastor disciples out in America.
목사 제자는 목사만 찾는 게 아닙니다.
And just to go seek out the pastor disciples, not only for the
예,
pastors.
브리스길라 아굴라 중요한 목사 한 사람을 찾았어요.
For Priscilla and Aquila, they were able to be used to go and testify the gospel to Apollo, who was one of the pastor at that time.
복음을 확실히 알고 있으니까 능히 가능해요.
And that was more than possible for them because they held on to the accurate gospel.
복음에 대한 이해가 바르니까 성경을 가지고 복음을 아주 정확하게 설명을 따요.
They had the accurate understanding of the gospel to which they were able to testify the gospel biblically.
아볼로 같은 사람이 여러분 정확한 어떤 지식이 바탕이 안 된 그런 복음을 받아들이겠습니까?
And for Apollo himself, who had so much wisdom and knowledge of the scriptures, do you think it's easy for him to just simply receive the gospel through such church officers?
성경을 가지고 이것이 복음이다, 그리스도가 복음이라고 말하는 딱 정확한 논리가 없는데 아볼로 같은 사람이 그 말을 듣겠어요?
But of course, for Apollo himself, he was well known with the scriptures. Do you think he had every right to just simply listen to the words of others regarding the gospel that he knew?
그냥 그리스도라고 막 말하는 게 아니고 일일이 딱딱 따져가면서 성경을 가지고요. 예수님은 그러므로 그리스도이냐.
However, by the word of God and the scriptures, they were able to instruct the way of the Lord to him.
오늘 23장은 사도 바울이 이제 드디어 잡혔어요. 로마로 끌려가기 위해서.
Acts 23 was when he was taken to go to Rome.
그래서 사도 바울에게 일어났던 모든 사건은요. 성령 인도.
And all of the incidents and events that arose to Apostle Paul was a process for him to receive the guidance of the Holy Spirit.
오늘 잡힌 것도 마찬가지예요.
And it was the same for him to be taken away.
죄수가 되졌잖아요.
And Paul became a prisoner.
사실은 죄도 없는데 안 그래요?
And he did not commit any sin.
그리고 사도 바울이 죄수가 되는 걸 자원했어요.
And rightfully so. They wanted him to be taken as a prisoner.
그래가지고 로마 황제한테 상고한다 했죠.
To the point that he would be taken to Rome to stand before the emperor.
그래 안전하게 딱 갔어요.
And he was able to safely arrive in Rome.
그때는 사도 바울 죽이려고 떼드는 유대인들이 많이 있었죠.
And of course, at that time, there were many Jews who persecuted and desired to kill him.
그러니까 우리 21장에 읽어보면은 그러잖아요. 로마에 예루살렘에 올라오기 전에 가지 말라고 얘기하는 사람들 많이 있었잖아요. 잡힌다고.
And even in Acts chapter 20, it was stated that there were many people who refuted for him to go to Jerusalem, for he would be taken away.
그런데 잡히는 게 하나님의 뜻이었고 가장 좋은 길이었어요.
But yet, that was the most safest and greatest way that God has planned for him to go to Rome.
그래가지고 감옥 안에서 복음 운동하는 거예요.
And he was able to partake within the gospel movement in prison.
아무도 죽이러 못 와요.
And there was no one that was able to put him to death.
그러는 것도 아주 법을 어기는데 그러면 난리 나죠.
And if that was the case, then one may go against the law. That would be an uproar.
그리고 복음만 해서 이제 친구들 왔다 갔다 하는 거 다 허락되니까 마음껏 복음다.
And there were many times that people would go and visit him. That is why he was able to rightfully testify the gospel as much as his heart desired.
하나님의 뜻이었어요.
It was God's will for him.
빌립보 감옥에서도 마찬가지죠.
And it was the same even in the time of the prison of Philippi.
그러니까 사도 바울은 이미 이거 하나님 계획이 있다는 걸 알고 일부러 들어갔어요. 가만히 놔놨어요.
For Apostle Paul, he already knew that that was God's plan for him, so he just simply stayed put.
로마 시민권 내놔버리면 안 들어가거든.
He just rightfully had to give up his Roman citizenship, and if he did so, he would not be sent to prison.
그럼 로마 감옥 깊은 곳에서 그날 저녁에 하나님을 찬양하는데 기적이 일어나.
But yet, on that night in prison, late at night, he was able to give praise to God, and there was a work of miracles that arose.
지진이 일어나가지고 막 가만히 있는데 전부 옥문 다 열려.
And there was an earthquake to which all the doors of the jail cell opened.
아시아에서 복음의 문이 닫혔을 때도 그렇습니다.
And also, even in the same time when the doors to go testify the gospel in Asia was closed,
드로아에서.
even in the time of Troas,
그때도 성령 인도에서 로마 마게도니아로 가라.
and even at that time, he received the guidance of the Holy Spirit to go to Macedonia.
이 모든 것이 어디서 출발했냐니까 다메섹 도상.
And it all began through the incident of Damascus city.
다메섹으로 예수 믿는 사람 잡으러 가는 그 과정 중에 그리스도 만난 그때로부터 출발.
He was on his way to go and persecute those who believed in Jesus, but at that moment, he was able to directly meet Jesus Christ.
그런데 읽어보면요. 어디를 가든지 제자 있었어요.
And if you continuously read the book of Acts, you're able to see wherever he went, there were disciples.
놀라운 일이죠. 그죠?
It's truly amazing.
진짜 생각해 봐야 돼요. 우리는 제자 한 명 없이 가면 헤맨데.
Even think about it, even in our case, we may not even have one disciple attached to us.
무슨 차이일까 이거?
So what is the difference between ourselves and Apostle Paul?
복음도 알잖아. 그래요?
We both know the gospel.
복음 운동도 해요.
We both partake in the gospel movement.
그왜 제자가 안 생기냐?
But how come there's no disciples attached to us?
내한테 복음 듣는 사람은 있어. 그러나 그 중에서도 제자가 있지. 듣는 데서 다 제자는 아니에요.
There may be those who are being attached to us to receive salvation by the gospel that we testify, but yet they do not stand as a disciple.
생각해 봐야 합니다. 사도 바울하고 내하고 무슨 차이가 있는가?
You must really be able to think about what is the difference between yourself and Apostle Paul.
물론 하나님이 하신 일이에요.
Rightfully so, it was the work of God.
사도 바울의 노력으로 안 되지.
It was
말이
not done
됩니까?
by Apostle Paul's effort. It can't be done.
근데 사도 바울이 어떻게 해가지고 베드로하고도 또 틀리잖아요.
But he was completely different from Peter.
베드로는 수제자인데
And for Peter himself, he just merely testified the gospel.
이유가 뭘까 하면 첫째 아주 복음에 대한 이해가 발랐어요.
And the reason is because he had the correct understanding of the gospel.
정확했어요.
It was accurate.
정확하다는 것은 우리가 예수님은 그리스도 그리고 삼지 이것도 지금 정확한 거예요.
Of course, for us to know the three offices of Christ, that Jesus is the Christ, is accurate.
근데 이게 딱 들어와가지고 발견이 되고 그렇구나 진짜네 이거 근본 문제 세 가지가 원인이고 그것을 해결하는 삼직이 진짜 이거 답이야 이게 복음이야 머리의 말만 말고 마음의 진짜.
It's not one to just simply know about knowledge, but truly accept and receive inside of the heart the three offices of Christ that came to go and resolve original sin and the three fundamental problems.
그때부터 시작이 되잖아요. 영적인 역사가 시작이 돼요.
And that's when the spiritual work has no choice but to be at work.
머리에 알고 믿고 구원받은 것에도 대단하고 감사해요.
It is tremendous, and we must be very thankful to God for we have come to know of this gospel by His grace of salvation.
근데 내 삶의 현장에 육신적으로 증거도 나타나야 되잖아요.
But rightfully so, there must be the physical evidence upon yourself in your fields.
그때는 진짜 발견이 되졌을 때 가만히 있어도 역사에 나.
That can only be done when you simply stay put and you really uncover the spiritual truth of Jesus Christ.
이때부터 문이 열리기 시작하면 계속적으로 열린다. 계속적으로. 예?
And that's when the doors will be opened. It will continuously be opened.
그래 항상 우리가 딱 초점을 둬야 될 게 뭐냐면 나는 진짜인가?
And that is why you must constantly check upon yourself. Am I truly holding on to the truth?
다른 데 눈 돌릴 거 없어요. 나는 진짜 복음인가?
So don't look elsewhere. May you really examine your spiritual state to see, am I
You-
truly holding on to the gospel?
여기에서 모든 거 결정이에요.
And inside of this will determine all things.
겸손하게 정말로 하나님께 기도. 하나님, 나는 어떻게 된 겁니까? 예?
Humbly before God, you must be able to pray, God, am I doing of only Christ?
겸손하고 진실하게 정말로 기도하죠.
You must be able to earnestly and sincerely with a humble heart ask God.
그리스도를 한번 고백을 해도 진짜로 하고 무릎 딱 꿇고 있잖아요. 안 그래요? 진짜로 하는 거예요.
And even if you confess of Christ, you must be able to truly give yourself and really make that sincere confession.
뭐 여러분들도 다 이런 경험이 있겠지만 어쩌다 보면 기도 제목이 진짜 들어올 때 있잖아요.
And you have your own experience as well too. But there are times there that the word of God hits your heart as a prayer.
그럴 때는 저는 어디 공원에 이런 데 운동하러 가서도 주위를 한번 살펴보고 무릎 꿇고 기도.
And during the time whenever I go and exercise, if there are time that I'm compelled to pray, I look around my surrounding. If there's no one around me, then I'll kneel down and begin to pray.
근데 내 마음에는 그래 해야 막 속이 시원하니까. 예, 그래.
And I have a tendency of doing that because I feel a bit much refreshed after I do that.
자주 일어나지.
And of course, that's outstanding to do.
집에서도 기도할 때 딱 그리스도 고백하고 싶으면 그 침대 위에 딱 무릎 꿇고 주님은 나의 그리스도라고 고백.
And if you sincerely have that heart to kneel before the Lord, why don't you kneel on your bed and just make the confession, Jesus, you are my Christ.
당연한 건데 점수를 조금 주시는 것 같아요.
It is so rightful. However, God would be very pleased with that.
딱 복음이 진짜 내 것이 돼.
For the gospel to truly be yours.
그리고 그게요 개인 언약이 딱 돼.
And that becomes your personal covenant.
내 인생 모든 문제의 답이 그리스도다.
And you're able to come to see that all the problems that you face, the only solution to that is
이게
Jesus Christ.
내게 언약으로 딱 들어.
And that comes inside of your heart as the covenant.
그걸 딱 잡고 사는 거예요.
And you're able to hold on to that as you live your life.
수시로 생각이 나면 고백을 다.
And if you continuously think of it, you make that as a confession.
이게 신앙생활이고 여기에서 모든 거 다 나온다. 내가 이룬 것은 이것이다. 그거잖아요.
This is your walk of faith, and you're able to receive all things through Him alone.
내가 그리스도라는 걸 있다 이루었다. 그것도 아닙니까?
Of course, with the fact that He is the Christ, that's more than enough.
그 안에 삼직의 약속이 있어요.
But yet, there is a promise of the three offices of Christ.
그러므로 너는 저주에서 해방이.
And that's why you have been liberated from all curses.
그러므로 너는 뱀의 머리를 깰 수 있어.
And you have the authority to crush the serpent's head.
그러므로 너는 24시간 하나님과 함께.
And that is why you have every right to be with God for 24 hours.
그러면 그걸 다 이루신 거예요.
And it is Jesus Christ who has finished all of that for you.
이렇게 딱 되지면 어느 날부터 하나님하고 가슴이 딱 통하게 돼 있어요.
Then one day as you continue on, that day will come upon you for you to connect with God.
하나님에게는 소원이 있잖아요.
Because God has a set desire.
세계 복음화,
It is world evangelization.
제자.
It is to be attached with disciples.
하나님의 소원이에요.
That is God's desire for you.
렘넌트,
To go and raise many remnants.
중요한 이 일을 할 중직자.
And the most important church officers who will be able to do this most important work.
하나님하고 딱 마음이 통해요.
And the one who is able to really connect with God's heart.
그래가지고 자꾸만 더 거기가 더 통해져가 세월이 갈수록.
Then as time passes by, you're able to connect with God even more.
자꾸만 더 하나님의 사람이 돼가는.
And you become a person of God even more.
그럼 하나님하고 내 사이에 있었던 갈등들이 있잖아요. 그게 자꾸 없어져가.
Then the confliction that you had between yourself and God will disappear.
한참 지나고 나서 되돌아보면 전 옛날에는 저리 가고 있었다는 것이 막 드러나요.
And you'll be able to compare yourself in the present time to the past, and you'll be able to see, wow, I was far away from God.
맨날 어디 다른 데 있어서 여기에 딱 있어야 되는데
And you'll come to see that you're elsewhere when you should have remained with Him.
거기를 자꾸만 생각을 하는 게 아니고 거기에 사람이 자꾸 만들어지가는 그게 하나님의 사람.
And little by little, you'll be able to become much more connected to Him. That becomes a person of God.
그러니까 불신자들은 혹 생각하면요. 그래 하다가 인생이 되나 이거 지금 오만 것 때만 것 생각을 다 해도 지금 살까 말까한데.
And many of the unbelievers, in their perspective, they'll think, what is that for you to do when you should think of something else to do as you live your life?
그게 아니지. 오만 것 때만 거는 니는 생각할 필요 없어. 그건 내가 생각할 테니까. 니는 요것만 생각해. 요게 하나님 메시지입니다.
But it's God's message for us that we should not live our lives like the unbelievers that think of many things. We should simply hold on to Jesus Christ, whom He has given to
딱
us.
들어와야 합니다. 그죠?
May that really be yours.
그래 되지면 이제 준비 딱 된 거예요.
And when that is truly yours, you are now prepared.
그리고 헌신하는 거지.
And you're able to devote yourself.
헌신해야 합니다. 그죠?
You must devote yourself to God.
이건 안 되죠. 헌신부터 하니까 자꾸 뭐 헌신이 깨지지. 헌신을 유지하려면 너무 힘이 들어요.
In most cases, many of the aspect in the first part is not taking place. That's why you devote yourself. That's why it's much difficult for you.
요거 되지는 것 같으면 헌신할 수 있는 내용도 주시지. 예를 들면 만약 헌금이다 이러면 요거 되지면 헌금할 돈을 주시지요.
If the first 3 points are taking place, then God will give you the heart and the covenant for you to give offering.
그래 내가 지금 하나님한테 주신 그 모든 것이 하나님 은혜이기 때문에 그 중에서 일부를 드리는 거 이것도 귀하고 참 감사해요.
So precious, and we're so thankful for the fact that we're able to give back what belongs to God, for He has given it to us first.
근데 그게 아니고 요걸 자꾸 하고 있으면요. 진짜로 이거 하나님 주신 것이다. 그리고 그걸 하나님께 드려서 아주 다릅니다.
But yet, if you're able to do these first 3 points, and you're able to come to acknowledge that it is God who has given you all, and you're able to devote yourself back to God's work, then it's completely different.
그 헌금 액수가 다른 게 아니고 영적 느낌이 달라요.
It's not even in the amount of the offering that you give, but yet how you feel.
그 뭐 다른 말로 표현하면 뭐 영적으로 좀 더 헌금되는 거지.
And in other words, you're able to have that spiritual leisure in which you're able to give much more of an offering to God.
지금 우리가 하는 헌금 다 틀렸다 그 얘기는 절대 아니에요.
However, I'm not trying to nitpick and say that all the offering you have given to God has been incorrect.
그럼에도 너무나 귀하고 하나님 나라를 위해서 중요한 일을 하죠.
And of course, even with that, that's so very precious, and God has allowed you to do that.
그러나 이런 것을 통해 가지고 딱 누림으로 응답으로 이렇게 되지면서 하는 거하고는요. 약간 영적으로 다르죠.
It's completely different in the spiritual aspect in which you're able to receive the covenant, you're able to enjoy first, and then you're able to give yourself as a devotion to God.
그리고 내용을 딱 가지고 있어요.
And also, He was the one who had the content.
요건 하나님이 제자에게 전달할 내용이거든요.
And this is the content that God gives so that it could be relayed to the disciples.
이 내용을 가지고 있는데 하나님이 제자를 붙여주겠습니까? 안 되죠. 보내봐야 되지도 않아요.
If one lacks to hold on to the content, nor has the content, then God cannot attach disciples to them.
우리는 지금요, 앞으로 자꾸만 더 발전하고 더 크게 되겠지만 렘넌트들 중에서 이래 사역자들이 하나하나 생겨요.
And little by little, I do believe that God will allow this to grow even more, but I am able to see that remnants will be raised as ministers little by little.
어른 사역자도 중요하고 참 귀하지만은요, 렘넌트들이 어린 나이부터 이런 사역을 한다 이런 것들은 이건 보통 일이 아니라고 저는 생각하거든요.
And of course, we're so thankful that the first adult generation are able to devote themselves within their ministry, but yet for a remnant to be used as a minister to do your work is not your average work that they can do.
제가 뭐 조사를 다 해본 건 아니지만 미국 교회 있잖아요. 미국 현지 일반 교회 어릴 때 이 어린 나이에 사역을 할 수 있는 사람 내 생각에는 한 명도 없을걸요.
In my own opinion, I do not see not even a single remnant that's able to devote themselves within the ministry, especially in the churches of America.
있겠습니까?
Do you think even one person exists to do that?
아니 교회마다 렘넌트 아이들도 없는데
Because there are many churches in America that lack to even have the next generation, the posterity, even in church.
있어봐야 뭐 할머니 따라 왔다 갔다 하고 뭐 이런 애들이지 안 그래요?
In most cases, many people, they just simply go to church following after their grandparents.
다락방 안에는 있을까요?
But do you think that in the Tarabang movement there's a lot?
있겠지만 절대 많지 않다고 저는 생각해요.
I do believe that they do exist, but not so many.
이걸 우리가 해야 돼요.
And yet, this is what we must do.
사역을 하려면 그 사역을 한다는 건 다른 사람한테 복음을 전하고 이러는 거잖아요. 그 사람은 반드시 내용을 가진 자예요.
In order to do God's ministry and to stand as a minister, you must be able to first hold on to God's content.
그냥 책 가지고 설명하는 거는요. 안 됩니다.
Just by simply explaining the booklet, that cannot be done.
그거는 지속 안 돼요.
That cannot continue on.
더더욱 확실한 거는 그 밑에서 제자 안 내렸어요.
For a sure fact, the disciples cannot be touched.
왜냐하면 이론이고 지식이니까.
Why is that the case? Because that's only a logic and theory.
교회는 학교가 아니에요.
But the church is not a school.
그래서 지식을 전하는 게 아니고 영적 지식을 전해요.
The church does not relay for one to just teach someone, but we actualize and we testify that spiritual aspect that we need.
그래서 교회에서는 이래라 저래라 하지 마라 이런 소리 잘 안 합니다.
And that's why inside of the church, there's no one that really tells one not to do this or to do that.
그걸 주로 하는 교회들이 많이 있어요. 옛날에 우리 다니던 교회들 거의 다 그랬어요.
So many of the churches in the past that we have attended, they were all like that.
물론 헌신 이런 거 얘기하면서 굉장히 감동도 되고 이랬어요.
Of course, within the devotion, if one gives a testimony, you're so touched and moved by it.
그러나 그것과 함께 행동, 행위 이런 걸 자꾸 얘기하기 때문에 성도들 사이에 싸움이 자꾸 일어나요.
But within the churches, they give many of the sermon of action and efforts and practice, to which many of the believers become very discouraged.
자기도 모르게 그 이제 행동, 행위 이런 거에 대한 얘기를 듣기 때문에 저 사람은 왜 이래, 너는 왜 그래 이리 된다고.
And because of the sermon always emphasized on the action and the efforts, many people simply nitpick on others' action.
그건 본래 하나님의 교회의 뜻이 아니에요.
But that's not God's will from the onset for the
사도
churches.
바울이 그 교회에 대해 얘기한 것도 이런 거 말한 적 없어요.
And also for Apostle Paul, he never once emphasized the importance of actions.
권면을 하거나 메시지를 하거나 영적인 의미를 담거나 이런 거는 때로 있어요.
And of course, he would encourage
행위를
one,
얘기해도.
give the message, or testify the gospel to his disciples.
여하튼 내용을 딱 가지고
But yet, you must be the one that has the content.
이 내용이 하나님이 세상에 말하는 것과 같은 내용이에요.
It must be the same content that God desires to testify in this world.
그게 이제 그리스도예요.
And that is Jesus Christ.
이 그리스도를 그냥 그리스도 하는 게 아니고 자기가 체험한 것을 통하여 설명하고 전달하는.
It's not only just to simply mouth it, that is Jesus Christ, but with one's experience and coming to the answer of Christ, they must be able to stand as a witness.
이 내용을 가지고 있는 사람은요. 제자를 얼마든지 키울 수 있어요.
For those who have this content of God's, they'll be able to raise up many disciples.
아무리 많이 몰려와도 괜찮아.
And of course, many may flock to them.
미국 전국에서 10,000명이 왔어.
And say there was at least 100,000 people that flocked to them.
죽음으로 하면 될 거 아닙니까?
Then they're able to devote themselves and testify of this.
내가 가진 내용을 전달만 하면 돼.
All they have to do is just simply relay the content that they have.
중요한 거는 그 내용이 하나님이 말하고 싶은 건가.
But what's very important is, do I hold on to the accurate content that God desires to relate to them?
제자 양육의 내용이 뭡니까?
What is the content for you to nurture disciples?
복음이지.
It is the gospel.
다른 게 아니에요. 복음.
It's nothing else but the gospel.
내가 나를 양육하는 것도 복음.
And it's the same for you to nurture your own self. It's only the gospel.
그럼 복음 뭐 다 아는데 뭐.
And we all know the gospel.
이걸 어떻게 누리는가?
But how much and how you can enjoy it.
누릴 때 무엇이 일어나는가? 왜 이걸 누려야 하는가?
And what takes place when you enjoy it. And why must you enjoy it.
이 복음과 관련된 성경적 많은 지식이나 내용들, 스토리 이런 것들을 함께 전달하라.
And also you must be able to relay the evidence that are recorded in the Bible.
그럼 그때 하나님의 역사예요.
That is when God will be at work.
하나님이 말하고 싶은 내용을 말하고 있어요.
You'll be able to testify the content that God desires to relate to them.
사람은 안 되지, 그죠?
And rightfully so. The person can't be changed on their own.
요거 하는 사람을 보고 남은 자.
And the one who's able to do this are those who are able to remain.
이것을 평생 하고 있는 영적인 순례자.
And they will be able to do this for the rest of their life as a spiritual
이
pilgrim.
사람에게 주신 하나님의 축복 결론 정복자.
And the blessing that God has given to them is to stand as a conqueror.
이렇게 되게 돼 있어요.
They have no choice but to be like this.
진짜 축복이 있길 바랍니다.
May this blessing be upon you.
세 번째, 사도 바울은 로마를 이해했어요.
Number 3, Paul understood Rome.
로마가 하나님의 소원에서 뭔지를 알았어요.
He knew that Rome was God's desire.
영적인 의미를 알은 거죠.
He knew the spiritual importance of Rome.
우리도 이래야 되겠죠.
You must be like this as well.
미국에 사는데 미국이 하나님의 이 영적인 일을 위하여 어떤 의미가 있는가?
You must be able to come to know the spiritual meaning and importance of America, why God desires it so much.
말씀을 자꾸 듣고 있는 중에 이게 들어와가 진짜 발견된다는 것은 영적인 일이거든요.
As you continuously listen to the message and one day you're able to uncover it, that is the spiritual work that God is working upon you.
그렇게 딱 되어지면은 미국이 언약이 딱 되는 거예요.
When that takes place, you'll be able to hold on to America as your covenant.
하나님, 나는 미국입니다.
You'll be able to make the proclamation, God, my place is in America.
내가 하나님 평생 하나님 문 열어주는 걸 따라 미국을 위하여 살겠습니다.
God, in each doors that you open, may it be open to go and save America.
사도 바울은 당대 최고의 그림을 가지고 있는 사람이었어요.
Apostle Paul was the one who had the great picture of God's desire in that
그래서
time.
사도 바울이 그 당시에 최고로 큰 사람.
That's why he was the greatest figure of all time.
하나님 눈에 보기에는 사도 바울보다 큰 사람이 없어요.
And there is not a great figure like him in God's eyes.
로마 황제나 정치인들이 보기에는 아무것도 아니지.
And the emperor of the Rome and also the officials at that time, they looked down at him.
그러나 로마 황제나 정치인들이 절대 할 수 없던 일을 사도 바울이 했어요.
But yet Apostle Paul was able to do more of the work that even the emperor as well as the officials could not do.
이건 예수님도 마찬가지죠.
And it was the same for Jesus as well.
바깥 모양을 보면 아무것도 아니에요.
In the outer appearance, he had nothing.
그러나 하는 일을 보면은 일어난 증거를 보면 이거는 인간은 뭐 생각도 못하는 일이에요.
But yet, when they took a look at the spiritual aspect and the work that he was able to do, it was the work that even mankind could never imagine. for it to
그래가지고
be done.
수많은 다민족 제자를 세웠어요.
And that's why he was able to raise up many of the Gentile and the multi-ethnic disciples.
이게 사도 바울의 가슴에 담고 있는 그 처음 받았던 언약.
And this was the very first covenant that he has received that was placed inside of his heart.
요게 우리 있어야 합니다.
You must be able to have this as well.
가장 귀한 거는 예수님을 알고 믿는 거예요.
What's so important for you is to come to know of Jesus Christ and to have faith in him.
일단 구원을 받아야 돼요. 구원을 못 받으면 이거는 모든 게 땡이니까.
You must be able to first be saved by him. If not, all is in vain.
그 다음에 두 번째는 그 복음을 누릴 수 있는 은혜를 받아요.
And secondly, you must be able to receive the grace in which you are able to enjoy the gospel that has been given to you.
이게 없으면은 진도가 안 나가.
And without this enjoyment, you can't take the next step.
뭐 점에 멈춰 서 있어요.
You have no choice but to simply stay put in where you stand.
그러나 누림이라는 것이 들어오면은 진도가 나가고 진행이 되고 발전이 돼요.
But when you're able to enjoy, you'll be able to grow, you'll be able to mature, you'll be able to take the next step.
그러면 자꾸만 증거가 나고 자동적으로 전도의 문이 열리게 돼요.
Then automatically the doors of evangelism will be opened.
그러니까 이렇게 되면 증거를 응답을 자꾸 받아가면은 그리스도가 자꾸만 더 언약이 돼요. 아, 그렇구나. 진짜 모든 문제 해결이구나. 다 이루어졌구나. 뭐 그런 거예요.
And if you come to see this, you'll be able to see through the evidence and answer that you receive that Jesus is truly your Christ.
그래 하면서 차츰 우리 마음에 하나님의 소원이 들어와.
And little by little, you'll be able to have God's desire as your own.
그 전에도 전도했어요.
Of course, in the past, even before all of that took place,
역사도
we were able to
일어났어요.
evangelize. There were works that arose.
제자도 있어요.
There were disciples that were attached to you.
근데 아직 하나님의 소원이 내게 언약이 아니에요.
But yet you lack to hold on to God's desire as your covenant.
차츰 그게 언약으로 들어.
And little by little, that becomes your covenant.
그래가지고 미국 같은 이런 단어가 내가 평생을 걸 언약으로 딱 들어.
Then you'll be able to come to hold on to America and you'll be able to stake your life to this as your covenant.
그러면 그 사람 미국을 위하여 일할 수 있는 사람.
Then that person will be greatly used for the sake of saving America.
시대적인 일이 일어날 수도 있어.
And even the historical work can take place with that person alone.
미국 역사에는 없었던 일이 일어날 수도 있어.
Even the great work that has never been recorded in America's history will take place.
왜 우리가 이래 말할 수 있어요?
Why are we able to say this?
하나님의 소원이니까.
Because this is God's desire.
그 다음에 또 뭐예요?
And what's next?
시대적인 복음을 받아.
This is the historical gospel that you have received.
지금 상황은 미미해요.
Of course, in this situation, the state that you stand, nothing is
아무
taking place.
관계 없어요.
It may have no connection with you whatsoever.
그러나 언약을 줬어요.
But yet God has given you the covenant.
지금은 노예잖아.
And they were taken as slaves.
그러나 언약을 받았어요. 꿈.
But yet he received the dream of the covenant.
시간이 흐르고 때가 되니까 아마 뒤집어져 버린
But
거예요.
as time passes by and the time came upon him, then all things were overturned for him.
그게 요셉 아닙니까?
That was Joseph.
갈등 중에 정말로 인생이 왜 이럴까 많은 생각이 있었겠죠. 모세가.
For Moses himself, he had many confliction. He began to question about his life.
어느 날 시간표가 돼가 말씀이 딱 들어왔는데 완전히 뒤집어져 버렸어요. 개인 인생만 뒤집어지는 게 아니에요. 아주 역사가 뒤집어져.
But the time schedule came upon to him to which not only was his life overturned, the entire world history was overturned because of him.
이 시대에 우리를 통하여 미국이 하나님의 계획이면 미국의 역사가 뒤집어져 버린대.
If it is God's will and His plan of this age to go and save America, then because of us, America will be overturned.
믿어지는 날이 오면 미국이 내게 언약이 돼.
And when that day comes upon you, you'll be able to hold on to America as your covenant, as you have faith in it.
하나님 미국.
And you'll be able to proclaim to God, my covenant is to save America.
이래 얘기하면 내가 하나님께 기도하고 싶은 모든 거 하나님 다 전달돼.
Then all things will be relayed to God
다 아니까 안 그래요?
because God knows everything.
하나님 미국을 뭐 이래라 말 안 해도 다 알아요. 하나님 미국.
You don't have to give a long length of a prayer to the Lord. You just simply say, God, my covenant is America, and He understands it all.
내가 응답받을 걸 전부 말을 다 해야 하나님이 다 알아듣고 안다면 그게 뭐 하나님입니까?
And if one says that I must be able to explain everything to the Lord, that's how He'll be able to understand me. Is that truly God?
하나님 이래 보면 다 아는 거지.
But yet, if you just simply say, Father God, He knows your heart and your will.
그리고 기도가 막 이래 많은 사람들이 있잖아요. 간단하게 다 합쳐가지고 하나님 한마디 하고 집에 가는 거예요.
There's so many people who just give such lengthy prayers to the Lord. You don't have to do that. Just simply make the confession. Father
우리
God, He knows and understands your heart.
원문에는 그 주님 가르친 기도가 아버지라는 단어가 제일 먼저 나온대요.
In the Lord's Prayer, in the original, it first starts with Father.
그런 이제 어떤 사람이 해석하는 걸 제가 한번 들었거든요.
And I was able to listen to someone's interpretation regarding that.
그러니까 아버지 말하면 끝이지 뭐 더 얘기할 거 뭐 있나 이런 뜻이라.
One interpreted and said that it must be our Father. In other words, if we just simply say that, then everything is finished. He knows our heart and will.
아버지 이래 말하면 그 안에 막 다 들었다는 거예요.
Because if we just simply say our Father, then everything is contained inside of that.
말 되잖아 안 그래요?
Doesn't that make sense?
하나님 다 아시는데 창세 전부터 아는데 뭐 우리는.
God knows everything, even before creation.
지금 뭐 하는지 뭐가 필요한지 다 아니까 니는 그 기도할 필요 없어. 그게 마태복음 6장 아닙니까?
It's Matthew 6:33. You don't have to seek and pray for other things because I know it all.
우리가 내 기도나 내 상황이나 내 이 신분이나 이런 것들을 잘 참고해야 돼.
You must be able to keep in your mind your prayer, your status, and authority that God has given to you.
여하튼 사도 바울은 거기에서 로마에서 아주 시대적인 엘리트도 만났겠죠.
And for Apostle Paul himself, he was able to meet many of the greatest elite at that time.
로마의 엘리트 지금 어디에 있습니까?
Of course, all of the elites were gathered in Rome.
미국도 마찬가지 아닙니까? 안 그래요?
It's the same for America as well.
어찌됐건 세계 1등이에요.
Regardless of it all, America is the number one nation.
우리는 배울 게 많이 있어.
There's so many things that you can gain and learn from in America.
근데 한 가지 영적으로는 배울 게 별로 없는 나라예요.
But I'll be honest with you, this is one of the places where you can't learn so much when it comes to spiritual aspects.
그리고 영적으로 이상해지기 때문에 그 문화가 이상한 문화가 살살 들어와요.
Because the culture that has been corrupted by Satan is plowing into us.
렘넌트 여러분 절대 그런 거 따라가면 안 돼.
So you remnants, may you never fall after the work of Satan.
영어를 하는 사람들은 문화가 되게 보면은 저 영어권 문화잖아요.
And in most cases, many of the Americans, they fall into the American cultures.
그리고 그 문화 그 여러분 자꾸 따라가면 안 됩니다.
So please don't follow after the American culture.
그 미국의 여러분 영권 문화 중에 첫째 저 미국 교회에 그 예배를 예사로 빼먹어요.
And the number one culture in the churches of America is that they take worship so lightly.
뭐 할 일이 있어 간단하게 예배 제껴버려.
If they have something else to do, they just simply miss worship.
아주 심해요.
It's a very serious matter.
이런 거는 절대 받으면 안 되고 그거는 굉장히 악한 짓이에요.
Please don't be influenced by that. That is such a wicked thing to do before God.
절대 그런 거 받지 말아요. 문화권이 여러분 영어고 이러면 그거 들어가기 싫거든 그런 생각에.
Don't be influenced by it, especially for you to be compelled and seized by the American culture of this age.
나는 영어를 못하기 때문에 영어권 문화가 아니에요.
And I don't speak fluent English. That is why I don't follow after the American culture.
그리고 크기도 내가 뭐 한국 문화권에 살았잖아. 그러니까 그런 건 나 별로 매만 안 들어와.
I was born and raised in Korea, so I have the Korean culture within me. I don't have much of the American culture within me.
여러분들은 근데 따라가면 안 돼요.
So for the remnants, please don't follow after the American culture.
내 생각에 한 중학생까지 한국 사람 하다가 그 이후에 미국 가서 공부하는 게 제일 좋은 것 같아.
And I do see that it's far greater to raise your child in Korea up until middle school and then bring them to America so that they could continue on their education.
한국 문화, 한국말 다 배워가지고 미국 와서 영어 뭐 공부하면 되니까.
It's far better for one to learn the culture of Korea and to learn how to speak in Korean fluently and then come to America and to learn how to speak in English.
그리고 엄마 아버지가 한국 문화권으로 사는 거 여러분 자랑스럽게 생각해야 돼요.
And especially for the remnants who are so emphasized by their parents of the Korean culture and their ways, you must be so thankful for that.
영적으로는 한국이 미국보다 나아요.
Because spiritually speaking, the Korean culture is far better than American culture.
우리는 영적으로 살아야 되잖아, 안 그래요?
So we must be able to live the spiritual way.
그리고요, 미국 교회 성도들 헌금 안 해요.
In many cases, many of the present believers in the churches of America, they don't give much offering to the Lord.
요거요 상당히 악한 짓이거든요.
And this is so wicked before God.
왜 헌금을 안 합니까?
Why don't they give offering to the Lord?
헌금만 하면 안 되지.
You must give offering.
한국은 보면 우리 교회가 뭐 일이 있어 그럼 은행에서 돈 일단 빌려가 목돈 헌금하고 그다음에 은행에 우리가 매달 갚잖아요.
In churches in Korea, they have the tendency where they have to borrow money, they'll get a loan from the bank, and then they'll pay it off.
미국 성도들은 이래하는 사람 아무도 없을걸요.
But I do
현지인
believe-
성도들 중에.
Especially in the present believers of America, they don't even have that mindset to do that for the sake of the church.
근데 저가 비즈니스 할 때는요 은행에 돈 억수로 빌려요.
But when it comes to their own personal business, they're more than willing to go and take a loan.
근데 교회 헌금을 위해 돈 빌리는 거 아주 뭐 죽일 놈으로 생각한다니까.
But when it comes to taking a loan for the sake of the church, they think that is the greatest sin and crime, that they don't even do that.
아니 교회 헌금을 위해서 은행에 돈을 더 많이 빌려야지 비즈니스보다도 안 그래요?
More than their own personal business, they must be able to go and get a loan for the sake of the church.
렘넌트 여러분은 절대 이런 거 대표적으로 더 예를 들었는데 이런 거 절대 따라가면 안 돼요.
I just gave you the representative example of it, but especially for you remnants, please don't follow after this mindset.
아주 악한 것이 내려온다니까.
This wickedness has no choice but to be upon you.
미국을 살리기 위해서 우리가 여기 있는 거 안 그래요? 이런 문화를 깨고 바른 성경 문화를 심으려고.
You must be able to turn against the American culture, and you must be able to truly hold on to the gospel culture and plant that in America to save it.
절대 따라가지 말아요.
So never follow after it.
그거 말고도 많이 있어. 귀신 문화에 전 세계 귀신 문화의 본산지예요.
And especially America, it's the headquarter of all headquarter, especially when it comes to demonic culture.
일본이 귀신 문화 많거든요.
Of course, in Japan, it's severely demonic culture.
미국 귀신 문화한테는 맥도 못 쳐야 돼요.
But the Japanese demonic culture has nothing to do with the American demonic culture.
미국은요 어디 큰 곰 같은 이런 거 있잖아요. 하마보다 더 하마 몇 배나 되는 이런 게 딱 버티고 있어요.
And to compare it in size proportion of an animal is much more bigger than a hippopotamus.
칼과 푹 찔러도요 아무 반응도 없어. 눈만 껌뻑.
And even if the demonic culture plows into it, one is just being so influenced by it.
일본 귀신은 차버리면 깨갱나.
But yet, within the Japanese demonic culture, you are able to simply bind that down. But compared to America, you can't.
미국이 그렇다니까요.
So that's how severe and serious this demonic culture is in America.
아무 표도 안 나면서 전 세계에 막 진짜로 표시 없이 막 이렇게 바닥에 다 깔아요.
Unseen
귀신.
to the eyes, it has much influence to the entire world.
절대 렘넌트 여러분 속으면 안 돼요.
So especially for the remnants, please don't be deceived by this.
그런데 딱 눈 뜨고 딱 기도하고 붙어야지 안 그래요? 전쟁을 붙어야 돼요.
May your spiritual eyes be open to this. May you fight the spiritual battle within prayer.
그래서 내가 지금은 잘 안 하는데 한때 좀 그런 이슈가 있었거든요.
And in the past, I had such an issue like this.
정시기도 할 때 있잖아요.
Whenever I give my scheduled prayer,
미국 귀신 형상이라도 여하튼간에 무슨 동물인지 표현은 잘 안 돼. 머리부터 큰 거 있어.
and so I was able to envision the great demon that was seizing and compelling America.
그래 정시기도 할 때마다 큰 칼을 가지고 목을 날렸잖아.
And each time I prayed, I would imagine myself holding on to a spiritual sword to cut and bind that demon.
어떤 때는 화나면 난도질을 해버려.
And at times, I'd make such physical action within my prayer as I hold on to the spiritual sword to fight against Satan,
미국 귀신이 이거 죽으라고.
so that I'm able to bind the force of the demonic culture in America.
그때 조금 정치적 이슈가 있었어.
And at that time, there was a political reason to it, so I began to pray for that.
그들 뒤에 역사는 귀신 완전 난도질 목 날려버리고
And
머리 반쪽 내버려.
My prayer alone, I was able to break down all of the demonic culture that was working behind them.
내 생각이니까.
That's just my perspective in my prayer that I gave to God.
정신 차려야 돼요. 절대 따라가면 안 돼요.
So may you truly come to your sense. May you not follow after the culture of this world.
미국의 문화를 성경 문화로 바꾸라고 우리 보고 여기 오라고 여기에 보낸 거예요.
You have been called in America to change the culture of America to the gospel culture.
그리고 정확한 복음을 딱 줘요.
And holding on to the act gospel.
이것 참, 이 복음만 들어오면 딱 들어오면 하나님 역사합니다.
And if you're inside of this, God has no choice but to be at work.
편안한 마음으로 웃고 있는 분도 있어요.
And with a peaceful heart, may you be able to truly hold on to
언약
this.
딱 들어가길 바랍니다.
May the covenant be upon you.
자, 결론 몇 가지 정리하겠습니다.
Let's come to the conclusion.
하나님의 소원에 눈을 딱 떠야 돼요.
You must be able to have your spiritual eyes open to God's desire.
이게 발견이 딱 돼야 돼요.
You must be able to uncover this as your own.
세계복음만은 하나님의 소원이다. 발견이 딱.
You must be able to uncover God's desire is world evangelization.
내게 언약이 딱 돼.
It must be your covenant.
그래, 미국
And America, it must be your covenant.
영적 전쟁이기 때문에요. 언약을 잡고 기도하는 자가 이겨요.
It is a spiritual battle. That is why for those who hold on to the covenant and pray, they will be victorious.
마지막 때 가가지고 막 난리가 나잖아요. 저 뭐 적군 쳐들어와가 안 그래요? 저 영적으로 저기지요 사단.
Of course, even in the end times, there will be the spiritual adversary, Satan, who comes and plows in to attack you.
언약을 가진 자가 막 부르짖겠죠, 안 그래요?
And rightfully so, those who have the covenant, they will go and fight against the spiritual battle.
하나님 때가 되면 나타나가 막 싹 한꺼번에 다 죽여버린다.
But when God's time schedule comes, all of the work of the enemy and the adversary will be put to death.
절대 저거는 우리를 못 이겨요.
And that is why the adversary, the enemy, can never overcome you.
아무리 강하고 우리는 아무리 힘이 없어도 필요 없어요.
It does not matter, even if your enemy is so great and powerful and you have no power whatsoever.
저거는 뭘 지옥이고 우리는 구원받아요.
Because the enemies and the adversary will be sent to hell and you'll be sent to heaven.
이제 그거 전해가지고 그들도 이리 오라고 하는 거지.
And that's why you must be able to go and testify this gospel so that many will return back to the Lord.
언약의 눈이 딱 열리면 하나님의 사람이 돼요.
When your spiritual eyes are open to God's desire in the covenant, then you'll become a person of God.
그리스도를 믿으면 영적으로 영원히 하나님의 사람.
And when you truly have faith and believe in Jesus Christ, you'll be
진짜 사실적으로 내가 느끼는 하나님의 사람은 언약이 딱 들어와서 하나님의 소원이 들어와서 언약이 딱 되는.
You'll be able to truly have a sense of feeling that you are truly a person of God when you truly hold on to God's covenant as your own.
그리스도 누리고 있으면 때가 되면 이래 만들어 주는 거예요.
When you enjoy Jesus Christ according to His time, He will allow you to become a person of God.
그리고 제자가 뭔지를 알아야 돼.
And the one who knows the importance of disciples.
설명 많고 수없이 우리가 윤 목사님 메시지 들었잖아요.
Countless times we have listened to the sermons of Reverend Yu.
어느 날 눈이 딱 열려.
But then one day your spiritual eyes will be open to understand it.
그때부터 제자를 알아요.
That's when you come to know the importance of disciples.
그러면 어떻게 해야 될까? 내용이 딱 정리가 되죠.
Then from there you'll be able to come to organize the content of what you must do next.
제자 전도하는 거예요.
And you must partake in evangelism disciples.
조직 전도되고 정복하는 거예요.
And then you'll be able to have the systematic evangelism to which you'll be able to conquer it all.
그리고 답을 가진 자가 돼야 돼.
And you must be the one who has the answer.
모든 문제를 뛰어넘을 수 있는 답이 딱 났어.
You are the ones that have the answer to surpass and overcome all problems.
무슨 일이 일어나도 상관이 없어. 딱그 뛰어넘을 수 있는 믿음이 딱 생겨.
Regardless of the situation or problem that you have, you already have the faith to overcome and surpass all problems.
유 목사의 메시지 중에 상관이 없어야 순례를 할 수 있다는 말을 했어요.
And the Reverend Yu's sermon, it said that it must not matter to you whatsoever, to the point that you could be within the pilgrim journey.
세상에서 일어나는 그 어떤 일도 상관이 없어요.
And that's why whatever that must take place within this world, it does not matter with you whatsoever.
필요 없고 나는 그리스도 세계복음.
You do not need anything else, for you only have Christ and word evangelization that you must head towards.
그 사람이 성공하고 정복해.
And the one who is able to do that alone, they'll be victorious and they will conquer all.
그거 가진 사람이 남은 자예요.
And those people are those who remain.
이 사람에게 순례 일어나요.
And they are the pilgrims.
하나님이 순례를 안 해주는데 어떻게 우리가 순례를 해요?
How can you take the pilgrim journey if God does not permit it to you first?
결과 정복하는.
And as a result, you'll be a conqueror that conquers it all.
축복이 있길 바랍니다.
May the blessing be upon you.
그 출발 오늘 말씀처럼 예수님이 다 이루었어요.
And the start to all of that is that it is finished.
누리고 있으면 이루신 내용이 우리 삶의 현장에 나타나.
When you're able to enjoy the content that He has fulfilled and finished, that will be revealed upon your fields.
그러니까 차츰차츰 다 이루신 것을 깨닫게 돼.
And little by little, you'll be able to come to realize that it is finished in Christ.
언약이 되고 그 하나님의 소원이 언약이다.
That becomes your covenant, and God's desire becomes your covenant.
그러면 정복하는 인생이 돼.
You'll be able to live a life of conquer.
축복이 있길 바랍니다.
May this blessing be upon you.
우리 렘넌트 여러분 많이 남아줘서 감사한데 진짜로 여기에 담나기를 바랍니다.
Especially for the remnants who have participated in this training message, I thank you all, but may you truly come to the answer.
기도하겠습니다.
Let us pray.
전능하신 하나님 은혜를 감사합니다.
Almighty God, we thank you for your grace.
그리스도의 놀라운 비밀 정말 감사를
We
드립니다.
thank you so much for the great mystery of Christ.
이 시대의 로마 미국을 알게 해 주옵시고
Allow us to come to know the Rome of this age, which is America.
언약이 되고 승리하고 정복하도록 축복해 주옵소서.
Bless us so that it will be the covenant, we'll be victorious, holding on to it as we conquer it all.
16차 캠프를 통하여 준비한 모든 영혼이 구원을 받게 하옵시고
And all the souls that you have prepared, may they receive salvation through the 16th church camp.
중요한 제자를 만나는 문들이 열리게 하여
May
주옵소서.
the doors be open to meet the important disciples.
주 예수님 이름으로 기도드립니다.
In the name of Jesus Christ we pray.
아멘.
Amen.